Hello, and welcome to Visual Strategies to Enhance Learning for All Children, presented by StarNet. In today's webinar, we're going to discuss the following: why we use visuals, the advantage of using visuals with the young children that we work with, different types of visuals, the hierarchy of visual supports, information shares, checklists and organizers, help with communication and socialization, and how do you get started? Think for a moment. Do you use any type of calendar daily? I do. I use one in my kitchen hung up on my refrigerator, and I use my Apple one. And as a matter of fact, I have one hanging in my office at work. Do you write down things to remember something? I do. I have notes all over my house. And if I really need to remember something, I hang the note on the door. Do you use Waze or Google Maps to help you follow directions? I do. I put on Waze almost every day to check the traffic and to preview the route that I have to take to get to my destination. We all need visuals to learn. And as a matter of fact, think back to COVID. I know we don't like to. We had some new visuals that we all had to figure out how to use, and many people needed assistance or reminders. Think about those new visuals that we all had to learn to use when you're working with your young children and they're not responding to the visual that you're trying. It's all about teaching and reminding and modeling. Visual strategies are things that we see that enhance communication. The primary use of a visual strategy is to help somebody understand. Most of us use visuals all day long in some manner. We use a Post-it, we make a list, we may leave something out to remember it, we use street signs. We use them to help us remember. Then why wouldn't we offer them to children? And think about this slide. When we hear something, that auditory information, it's just fleeting. It's here and then it's gone. But when we use a visual to help us remember something, visual information lasts long enough for the student to see it, take in that information, and respond to it. Visuals provide information in a form that many of our students can understand more easily than that auditory information. So think about that. When you tell a child to do something and that child doesn't respond, or that child doesn't respond in the way you would like them to, maybe that auditory information went, as we say, in one ear, out another. Would they respond if you gave them some type of visual? So if you signed on to listen to this webinar, you're probably thinking, why do I even use visuals? What's so good about them? Well, here's just a short list. They're so easy to use. Again, go back to the visuals you use all the time in your life. I'm a big note writer, so I have pieces of note paper all over the place. I have pens all over the place. I have pretty pens that sometimes make my notes a little bit more appealing. I have tape. So they're easy to use. They require very little training. We do have to teach and model to the child, but it's not like an 8-week course that a child has to go through to understand the visual. A really important thing so we can share with parents, or if you're a parent listening, welcome. They are inexpensive. They don't cost a lot to make. They don't have to be ordered from an expensive catalog. The other really important thing is they can be individualized for a child, for an adult. When I say individualized, for example, if I'm really into Star Wars, each of my visual cards could have a little visual from Star Wars on it, or they have Obi-Wan Kenobi telling me what to do. The biggest reason we use visuals is they can help to make a child independent. If I have a visual I can look at and follow the steps, I don't need someone standing over my shoulder telling me what to do next. The other thing, back to how they're inexpensive, is with Google Images and cameras on our phones, you don't need fancy computers. Back in the day, I had to buy a fancy program, a very expensive fancy program to print pictures. Now you can easily get pictures, and these pictures are much more meaningful to children than a black and white line drawing. In school, this is really important. Communication breakdowns can really be the cause or the root problem in social interactions, the way I perform in school, and my behavior. So I'm a speech pathologist, and I've worked for StarNet for many years now. And many times I would be called into a classroom or to a child care with a child that they were having behavior concerns with. But when I got to the classroom, at least 70% of the time, there was a communication issue, not a behavior issue. Yes, there was a behavior issue because that child could not communicate their needs or could not understand what was going on. But the root to that child's problem was communication. And with some easy suggestions of visuals, 90% of the time, those behaviors decreased. The other thing is, if communication is the problem, and I'm going to talk about this later, remember that I need to be able to communicate all day long. So don't just give me a visual during circle time and take those visuals away from me. Do I have a way to communicate when I go to centers? Do I have a way to communicate when I go to the gym? Do I have a way to communicate when I get on the bus and go home? The next slide is from a wonderful article by Linda Hodgen. And if you look up her name, she is a guru on visuals. And she wrote this article and came up with 25 reasons why we should use visuals. And the point, I'm not going to read all these, but while I'm talking, I'd like you to look at them. The article suggests that defining the child's needs to make a decision which visual we use. When we know the purpose, we can figure out what to use and how to use it. So for example, do you see a child breaking down with managing their time? How do you manage your time when you're in early childhood? We say clean up and that child doesn't clean up. Or they clean up a couple toys and then they get distracted and start to play again. We need to think, what visual could I give that child to help them manage the cleanup time better? Or organizing materials. Again, when it's time to clean up, does that child know where the toys go? Do they know where the big blocks go compared to the little blocks? So if I see a child that's really having problems with cleaning up after centers, I could really decide what visual would help that child clean up. And in many of our classrooms, we already use visuals like this. For example, with the blocks, we might have an outline, a black outline or a piece of construction paper that shows where the big blocks go, where the medium blocks go, where the small blocks go. Those are visuals. So again, think back to Linda Hodgen. When you're having an issue with the child, what is the purpose? Where is the breakdown happening? And what visual can I come up with that would really hone in on that specific problem that the child is having. And we're going to touch on several of these during the webinar today. So look at this list and think of your classroom. Think about last year, if you're listening to this over the summer, or think about your new classroom during the year. How many of these functions are accomplished in your classroom with visuals? Are there visuals so children can make choices? Are there visuals to help children support language retrieval? Do you have visuals so children can communicate their different emotions they're feeling? I bet if you take the time to really go through this list, you will realize how many visuals and different types of visuals you supply to your children in your classroom. When visuals are in place and used consistently, these are some of the things we can start to see children do. The visuals can act as words for children. We see them learning concepts more quickly and complete activities without assistance because now that visual tells them what to do. We see oftentimes reduced aggressive or self-injurious behavior. And it's said that I can express myself and get my needs met. I don't need to act out. So as I said about being called in for the behavior issues, if I know how to express myself or if I know what I'm supposed to do because I have a visual, you are going to see less behavior issues. We also see a decrease in stress, frustration, and anxiety. And again, it goes back to communication. If I can communicate, I do not have to worry that I won't be understood or that I may do the wrong thing. And finally, a child learns to adjust to changes at home and at school. Visuals we use in school absolutely need to be shared with parents at home. The more consistency we develop for children, the better. So here's a great example of a calendar that can be shared with parents. And what this calendar shows is when there's a bus, I go to school. When there's a home, I stay at home, which is the weekend. And we know that our children don't know what it means. In early childhood, I don't know what it means in 3 days you stay home or in 3 days you go to grandma. But if I had a calendar with some visuals, it would be much clearer for me. When I was in the classroom, I worked with a little boy who had autism, and his father was a pilot. And it was very confusing for the child when the father would be home and when the father would be away. And we actually used a form of this calendar that had a home and an airplane. So when dad was flying, there was an airplane. And the mother said that the tantrums at night decreased significantly once the boy learned how to check this calendar, and he would understand whether or not his father was coming home from the airport or if he would be flying. So you can see again how simple this is to make. You can get free calendars online. You cut out that little picture. Now you can, cut and paste online. You don't even have to cut out the picture. And we just mounted it on a piece of cardboard and a little piece of string, yarn, I think, so it could be hung in his bedroom on his dresser. When we provide consistent visuals to children, these are some other things we will start seeing them do more consistently. Children will learn to anticipate what's next. They won't have to constantly ask us. They also will learn the expectations of the classroom or expectations at home. They'll learn to follow rules. In most of our classrooms, we have a poster on the wall with the classroom rules. But do we refer to those rules? Do we point them out to the children? Do we review those rules? Do we point out not only when a rule has been broken, but do we show the children when a rule has been followed and the good results? Again, pointing to the picture that goes with that rule. When we consistently use visuals, children will know what's happening in their day. And we do that by referring to our schedule, and we're going to talk about the importance of the schedule. When we give children visuals, they can learn how to complete a task or to play more consistently because the visual is going to show them what to do and what to do next. Visuals can also help a child transition smoothly from one activity to another. And then finally, using consistent visuals helps children make choices about what they want to do. They can make a choice where they want to play. They can make a choice what they want to eat. But if I don't have the words, maybe I need a visual. So with all of these things occurring and helping children, why wouldn't we use visuals? Susan Stokes was a presenter that we had for many years at StarNet, and she spoke on visuals extensively. And she once said in a presentation, visuals should be looked at as a prosthetic device and not crutches to be weaned away from a child. We wouldn't take them away. So it's important, even if the child is improving, not to take the visual away. Go back to the beginning of this webinar when we talked about the visuals we all use. Nobody better take away my notes. Nobody better take away my calendars. Waze better not stop working. I need those supports, and so do children. Here's just some examples of some of the things I was talking about. Here are some visuals that really show a child a clear beginning and end to the activity. I may be matching colors, but if you add the word, maybe I'll start learning how to read those words. Or maybe I'm a child that actually focuses in on print, and I am reading those words already. We all know there are some children on the autism spectrum that start to read at a very young age. This book on the bottom right that says Fun, Fun, Fun in the Sun could be given to a child while you're doing a reading activity in a large group, and that child can match the pictures or move the picture. The picture in the bottom right is put on with a piece of Velcro. So when you're done with that page, maybe the child moves that picture. And by giving the child something to do, they can stay involved in the activity. And then the picture on the left of the dog, we're matching the number 3 is on Velcro, and then we have 3 dots to put on the dog. And again, these big visual googly eyes might make me pay more attention to the number instead of doing just a plain worksheet that's not developmentally appropriate for me. Here's some more examples of visual. The picture on the left was given to a child when the class was taking a nature walk. So yes, some children can walk outside and look at the leaves turning different colors and look at the pine cones that fall. But a child on the autism spectrum maybe, or a child that is nonverbal, just could be walking outside and losing interest. But if you gave them this visual, when they saw one of these things like leaves or water or a feather, they could circle it with a crayon. And maybe they're walking with this in a clipboard. A lot of us use these visuals on a lanyard or on a ring to help our students throughout the day. The point I want to make about these, A, they need to be used at consistency, but we don't want to tell the child what not to do. We want to teach the child what to do. So you can see the very first one says clean up. So you see in that picture, it's showing the child putting the toys away. It doesn't say stop playing. We don't want a card that says don't run. We want a card that says walking feet because it's teaching me what to do. The visual should teach me what to do. Our card shouldn't say no hitting. It should say hands to ourselves. And again, it should have a picture of the child putting hands to themselves. So think about your classroom last year or think about your classroom this year, and what was the most successful visual that you used or your teacher used in your classroom? Why do you think that visual was so successful for either the whole classroom or a specific child? Did it tell the child what to do? Did it tell the child what came next? Did it tell the child what to do in a certain situation? And go back to that list from Linda Hodgins, remembering, knowing the meaning, what it's helping with, makes that visual that much more useful and successful. So when we think about different visuals that we could be using in our classroom, let's start with the physical space. And I hate to bring up COVID again, but think about during COVID, how many visuals we really had to use in our classroom to mark off physical space, to mark off those clear boundaries. COVID might be over, but there are some children that need clear boundaries to understand expectations and to give them clues. And we do this by the way we place our furniture, the way we set up our furniture, maybe the way we position things in circle time. So one example is maybe one child needs a square marked off in colored duct tape so they can stay on their letter on the carpet during circle time. We also give boundaries with personal areas, right? So the children know their cubbies, and maybe you put up their name. Maybe you have a picture that symbolizes their name. Maybe you have a picture of the child on their cubby. Sometimes our snacks are brought in and they're in an individual bag, so the child has a physical boundary that they know that is their snack. How do you set up that physical space in your individual group times or your big group times? So in group time, do you just tell the children to sit on the carpet, or is there some kind of visual marking that lets me know where I sit? Most of us have that. I also see this a lot in classrooms with our lining up when we have to transition. Do we have clues to show the children how to line up? Are there clues to remind them how they should wait? And when I say clues, I should be saying visuals. Because again, if I just tell a child to stand in line and put your hands by your side, that's not as clear as a picture maybe on the door demonstrating and visually seeing the class lined up with their hands by their sides. So look at this picture and think to yourself, what physical supports do you see in this picture? Is there a clear entrance into that center? Are there picture labels and word labels that show me where to put things back? Can I figure out how many people can play in this center? If you look to the far left, there's 4 little hooks and the children must hang a little necklace. So then the child, a lot of us use this strategy, okay? And this teaches the children to figure out whether or not they can play in the center. They don't have to come up to you and say, I want to play in the library. Can I play there? All we need to do is tell the children to check the necklaces. Is there an open hook? So that's a visual, a physical support that helps children know, and it also helps them to become more independent. Do you use a class schedule with your children, and do you see the value of it? A schedule used consistently tells me what comes next. And then I don't need to ask you, when's snack? When is gross motor? When am I going to go see mommy and daddy? It's our job to use that visual that most of us have posted in our classroom consistently. So when an activity is over, it's important to let the children know that activity is over and let them know what comes next. It's also important when a child asks you that question, when is snack? When do I see mommy and daddy? you refer back to the schedule and show them visually how many more things they need to do before they get to go home. So the use of a consistent schedule, a visual schedule in our classroom is probably one of the most important visuals you can use in your classroom to help your students. We need to divide the day into segments. For some children, we might need to name that segment for the child. Then we need to decide, how am I going to represent this schedule? Am I going to use words? Am I going to use pictures? Am I going to use a picture with a word? Will my kids understand if I use black and white line drawings? And then we have to select a format. Most of us have a group schedule, but do you have children in your classroom that maybe need an individual schedule that they can check throughout the day? Then we need to think about, where will it be displayed? Where is a place that the children can refer to that schedule all day long? It might be a wall in the front of the room, or it might be a wall by the door, or it might be by the children's desk, or it might be in the dramatic play area because that's where we have them at home. You have to decide where it will be best. And then you're going to have to decide, how will students use it and how will teachers use it? So how will you indicate that an activity is over? Do you turn it over? Do you ask a child to turn the activity over? Do you have the calendar helper who's also the schedule helper, and maybe they move a clothespin when an activity is over? Something very important I want to talk about is this to the far right, that universal no sign. When something in your class schedule is not going to happen because there's an assembly or a field trip or somebody is sick, you can't just say to the children, think back to my slide with the auditory little ear there, we're not going to gross motor today. They need a visual to understand that. So if you take some clear contact paper or a scrap of laminating paper and draw in red this universal, a circle with a line through it, and then you would stick this on top of the picture of gross motor. It shows the children that gross motor is still there. Gross motor hasn't disappeared, but just today we can't go to gross motor. When I started using this universal no in my classroom, I can't tell you the difference it made for some children. So again, just at the bottom of the slide, we use this schedule to show what's going to happen next, what's not going to happen, what changes, and again, the sequence of events. That's what a schedule does. And right now, we need this schedule to be as visually appealing to children as they need. So when I say appealing, are we representing that schedule in the right way? So here's just two examples of a schedule. The one on the left actually was made by a mother who realized her son with autism needed every part of his day broken down for him. So she made on individual file folders, this might be morning time. She made a schedule for him, and he ripped off the picture and he put it in the little red envelope that said stop at the bottom. When the child was done with that, this schedule was put away, and maybe now he had a schedule for center time. On the right is a simple, really it's a choice board, but we made it a schedule showing the child that maybe first they had calendar, then in calendar they were going to talk about weather, then they were going to listen to a story, and then there was going to be a show and tell. So again, you can see it doesn't have to be up and down, it doesn't have to be across. This is just made on a cookie tray from the dollar store with some physical boundaries, some red tape in quadrants. And after the class would discuss calendar, the child would take that off. This is on magnetic paper. And then he would be cued to look at the next thing that the class was going to do. And this helped this child really stay and participate and be a part of circle time, morning circle. As I said earlier, some children do need an individual schedule to use and to check throughout the day. So in this classroom, you can see there were 3 children that had individual schedules. And the teacher would say to the children to help them transition after each activity, check schedule. And the children learned. One child had the yellow schedule, one had the orange, one had the green. They were taught which schedule was theirs. They would go up to the schedule, they would take off the picture that is done, they would throw it into that basket or place it in the basket, and then they would check what is next. So again, not everybody can just use that big class schedule. Some children need some extra visual supports. On your own, after you watch this webinar, if you go to YouTube and type in using visual supports for all children, there should be a short 5 minutes Apple's video from StarNet: Early Childhood. And in this short video, they discuss and summarize many of the points that I've been saying. But I think it would be something good to share with parents, to share with other colleagues. It really stresses the importance of visuals and how we all use visuals. So why shouldn't we be using them for children? Besides using visuals consistently, this slide is probably the second most important thing I want you to take away from today. Many times when people tell me that visuals don't work, it's either that we're not using them consistently or we're not using the right visual for that child. There really is a hierarchy of visuals. At the top of that hierarchy, the most obvious type that we want to start with some children is using a real object. So if I want a child to play with a block, I hold up that block. I'm showing them the real block. After real objects, then I might be able to go and use miniature objects. So you can get these miniature objects online from Amazon, in any craft store where they have the dollhouse stuff. There are thousands and thousands of miniatures. Now again, this is more expensive, more time consuming to have little miniatures for everything that happens in the day or for a task that you want a child to do. But there are some children that this is where they need to start. Many people, after they have a real object or a miniature, they go to photographs, like a picture of the child doing something. But they often say the child now is not using the visuals. When I had miniatures, the child used the visuals, but they're not. The reason they're not is because we've skipped a stage for some children. And this again is from Susan Stokes, who I spoke about before. And she calls this stage that we skip that we need to have a Toby. And what a Toby is a two-dimensional picture. And I'm going to show you this in a minute. But again, let's review this hierarchy. We start with the real object. We move on to miniatures. We then go to a Toby, which is a two-dimensional object. Then we go to pictures, line drawings, which are those black and white line drawings that some of them are very obscure, so that's difficult for some children. And then we go to real written words. Again, we always think it's smart to pair that written word with any of our pictures because some of our children do cue into those written words. So let's talk a little bit more about what a Toby is. For children who have difficulty understanding the two-dimensional visual representation of a photograph and require objects as their visual representative system, we can use a true object-based icon. That's what Toby is short for. And these Tobys can be any line drawing picture, but what you do, look at the picture of the beanbag. You cut out that picture. So on the bottom, we have the picture of Pooh Bear, and that's a flat photograph. But we have made the beanbag chair a Toby by cutting off the extra and making it the shape of the object. Tobys tend to be somewhat larger than your typical two-dimensional picture. When first introduced, they should be maybe as big as 3 inches. Because think about it, you're going from a miniature object to this, so we don't want it to be a tiny little cutout. And then we always should add the printed word, like on the picture with Pooh Bear, because again, that's what some people cue into. So, not every child needs to use a Toby, but if you have a child that is not responding to visuals, I want you to go back and think about this hierarchy that I just talked about. Where do you need to start? Did you start with black line drawings and that's just too high level with children? So think about that and remember the hierarchy and remember the Toby where we cut out the picture. So shifting gears a little, another way we can use visuals is to help children share information. So a lot of times when children with special needs or even just young children come home from school and the parent says, "What did you do in school today?" and the child can't tell. It's too much. The day was too long. So how can we support children? We can use something called a conversation starter. And this helps the child explain or develop a conversation of what they did in school. So what is that? It can be as simple as a piece of paper with some drawn pictures or Google images of pictures that are things the child did today. So maybe there's the child doing something in gross motor. Maybe there's a picture of all the different centers the child plays at. Maybe the child went on a field trip and that day we add a picture of the field trip. When the child gets home and the mother says, "What did you do in school today?" the child can circle, because we've taught them, the things they did in school. Maybe they're just going to circle one thing, or maybe they're going to circle 2 things. But again, a conversation could then be started because that child was able to share some information easier than if you just say, "What did you do in school today?" Another information shares can be a people locator, and I can show you some pictures of these in the next slides. But I remember this as a young child. I had cousins that lived far away, and my mother used to have to quiz me about my uncles, which uncle I was going to see. But if we had photographs of different relatives, you could pull out that photograph before the kid visits that uncle, and you can review. This is Uncle Bob. We're going to visit Uncle Bob. Or in the classroom, we have pictures of all the extra staff members that teachers in the building. So you might have a picture of the speech pathologist. You might have a picture of the maintenance man. You might have a picture of the lady that brings the snacks to the classroom. And then we show these pictures to the children so they can start communicating about those staff members. So here's just an example. The picture on the left is what I did at school today and what I did at home. And this had some Velcro pictures. Now remember, I was talking about black line drawings. These are examples of black line drawings. So for some children, what I did at home, that first picture on the top left is the library. That might be too obscure for a child. So that's why I'm saying you might need to use photographs before you can use these black line drawings. So again, the child could rip off, these are on Velcro, what they did and put it in the pocket. And the parent could send this folder back to the school, and the child could, when he gets to school, rip off one of the pictures to tell the teacher and to start a communication or a conversation with the teacher about what they did at home. Here's some other examples. Could be, what is your favorite snack? What's your favorite game to play? And again, these are clear visuals. These, all the different chips are just taken from Google Images, okay, or your favorite toy. So maybe you want to know what a child got for their birthday, okay, and you can have all these different toys and they circle it or point to it. But again, think about, this is to help a child start communicating, because sometimes those questions that we ask children are just too broad and big for them even to know where to begin, if they can communicate. You also can use these with the child that cannot communicate verbally and needs pictures to communicate. I think a lot of us use this strip, this mini schedule, to help break down a demand that we might ask the kids to do. So a demand we often ask the children to do is to wash their hands, and they have to learn the steps in washing their hands. But if you can look closely at this strip, I want you to see if you can figure out what might be missing from this strip. We turn on the water, we apply the soap or put the soap on, we wet our hands, we wash our hands, and we dry our hands. So this strip did not tell the children to turn off the water. So I put this in here to show you, you have to be really, really careful when you're making any of these visual supports in the classroom. Did you break it down and really have visually represent all the steps that might need to be taken? So just be careful, because otherwise the child could walk out of the bathroom or walk away from the sink and the water could still be running, but they did wash their hands and dry their hands. Here's an example that I really liked. This weight card. This was a picture of a train that a boy liked to play with in a classroom. And the teacher took a picture of the train set up and all put together, and then she cut it into 3 strips. And as the boy was waiting, she handed him a strip. After he got all 3 strips, he put the puzzle together and was able to go play with the train. But this taught him some waiting skills. The other thing I know a lot of people use, but it's such a simple thing, is a first then picture, file folder, cardboard, whatever works for you. But the important thing is when I do first then, sometimes we just say to a child, first finish putting the blocks away, then you can go to circle. Remember that picture of the ear? That goes in one ear and out the other. If I had a visual that showed him first put the blocks away and I point, then circle, they know what to do. You can keep showing it to them. The other thing with a first then is it's portable. I can take these pictures anywhere. I also could just use a whiteboard that can be wiped away. I can write first, draw a little picture, write then. But remember, the first is the undesirable task that the child has to do. The then should be something desirable that the child wants to do, because we're asking them first complete this thing, then I'm going to reward you. And the then doesn't have to be a big thing. And again, there are those little visual cards that we all use, and I can't stress we have to use them consistently. They need to be positive to teach a child what to do, and everybody needs to be using them. As I said, I'm a speech pathologist, so I really want to stress the importance of using visual supports to help with communication. When we do this, this allows that nonverbal child a voice, a way to communicate in a different way other than gesturing or trying to vocalize or pushing and pulling because I don't have the words. So we can teach parents to use visuals of pictures of food that can be put on the refrigerator, and the child can point to the picture of the food that they want for a snack. We could use paper tokens to indicate how much food or drink a child can have. So maybe we put out 4 red squares, and that teaches the child that they can have 4 crackers right now. We could also write out a script to carry out a conversation with a child. But remember, I can't stress this enough, we don't take the communication support away from that child. That child needs to have a way to communicate all day long. We can also use visuals to help children with social interactions. And I'd like to just read this slide for a minute. Social interaction requires a shifting back and forth from person to person. So you speak and then I speak. You must rapidly establish attention and shift attention. So I'm going to talk, but now I have to listen to you talk. Many of our students have difficulties accomplishing these skills at the speed necessary to participate in social interactions. Auditory information disappears before some children have a chance to respond. They may also miss some of the important information being communicated. So making social situations visuals can really help some children learn to be a participant and an appropriate participant in social situations. So one example is I had a little boy that during circle time, he just wanted to talk the whole time, wanted to share, and he monopolized the conversation. So what I did was I gave him 5 colored index cards. And I taught him that every time he shared some information with me, he had to give me a card. And when his cards were done, he wouldn't be able to participate and speak during circle time anymore. It sounds kind of harsh, but it really taught him to pace out his participation in the circle time and what he wanted to share. But those visual cards really helped him learn to pace himself. So, what are some other examples? We could use a visual to help children learn to share their attention, to take turns, as I said, to follow along in a story. Maybe a child needs their own version of that book so they can follow along and answer questions. We could put a marker in front of a person so they know when it's their turn when they're playing a board game. Maybe there's too much going on with the board game that they don't know when it's their turn, or they want it to be their turn before it's their turn. If you're playing a leader kind of game in the classroom, let that leader wear a silly hat, because then that's a visual for me, the other child, to know who I'm supposed to be watching. It makes it very clear to the children. I think a lot of us do this, but the use of timers is a wonderful visual for children. Now, a regular egg timer works for some kids. They don't understand what it means when we say there's 5 minutes left, but just the dinging alone might be enough of an auditory reminder for them. But many classrooms, we use something called a time timer. And this is a timer that shows red for the amount of time. And as the time starts to tick away, that red gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So if I'm a visual child and I do not understand what you mean that I have 10 minutes left to play in the water table, I can watch the amount of red on that timer. And I know as the amount gets smaller and smaller, my turn is almost over. What I want you to do now is read this on your own and decide what visual do you think might help this child. I think the visual that would really help Jenny, many of us use already. We have broken down the steps for the children, what they need to do at arrival. So I go into many classrooms, and on a child's cubby, it might have take off your coat, hang up your coat, hang up your backpack, take out your papers, put them in the basket, go wash your hand. But what we need to remember is I might need a different strip for the end of the day. But that visual, if I teach Jenny and I point out and I demonstrate, pretty soon Jenny is going to be able to individually check that visual and get herself ready for the beginning of the day and get herself ready for departure and do all the tasks that she's required to do in the classroom. Visuals can be really helpful in helping children make choices. Choices can be hard for children. So there's opportunities all day long during morning, during circle, during snack. I might have to pick which snack I want. And when we let kids make choices, it gives them more power. And making choices is a really important skill. So this is something that I did when I was in the classroom. Instead of me picking what song we were going to sing, I had 5 or 6 choices, and I let a different child pick which song we were going to sing. Now, remember again, some children could pick out of 6 songs, but some children, maybe you need to only show them 2 songs, you know their favorite songs, or 3 songs. So, and again, Some children might need a picture from the cover of the video that you watch. Some children might need a picture of the CD cover. So this again is that black line drawing that doesn't always work for all kids. Already using visuals in our classroom, but just think if it's the beginning of the year, if it's after the holidays, what do you need to get started? You need to have pictures, and we talked about, are you ready for pictures or do you need to have those objects? How are you going to make the visuals stick to whatever? Are you going to use Velcro? There's magnetic tape. There's even magnetic computer paper. Are you going to hang them on a key ring? Small photo albums are great to put pictures in because, again, we always want our visuals to be portable. Are you going to use different colored paper? So maybe I know food is on the red paper, toys are on the green paper. You need markers. You need these to be durable besides portable. So are you going to laminate them? Are you going to use contact paper? Are you going to put them on a consistent size index card? Are you going to use stickers? Do you have Velcro so the child can rip it off themselves? So think about all this as you're planning and making the visual. Because again, I can't stress, you want that visual to be portable and durable so the child can use it all day, every day. Before this webinar is over, I really want to stress this next point. Again, when people say to me, I tried using that visual, but it If the child is capable, involve the child in the process of making the visual. So could they help you pick the pictures from Google Images? Can they help you cut, or could they help you draw? Could they color a border around the visual so it sticks out? Can they help you manipulate the schedule? Like make sure they can rip off the Velcro. Can you teach them how to write the word done or stop or finished? And then maybe that's where they know where to put their cards. So I know children are at all different levels, but the more you involve the children, the more they take ownership in this visual that you are making for them to use. Just a few final points. Sometimes a child needs just one picture as a visual support. There's just one area that child needs help with. Sometimes a child needs a sequence of pictures as a visual support, meaning that child needs that task broken down just a little bit more. Visuals always need to be placed at the child's eye level if we're posting them. So like their schedule or the rules should be at their eye level so they can check that visual. And we need to be using visuals. It's like a form of language. So we need to model it. We need to teach them how to use it. And we need to not take it away from them. And you can help a child learn through seeing. So again, back to that original slide of mine with the ear and the eye, right? I can learn through this visual. This visual is going to help me and it's going to make my day at school or my time at home easier. So thank you for listening today. If you have any further questions about visuals or how to implement visuals in your home or in your classroom or a specific child, we're happy to help here at StarNet. So please call us or you can email us and someone will get back to you. Have a nice day. Good night.